city. You say Boston has a more colonial aspect to it. You go to other cities, they have their own flavor to it. Yerushalayim, according to the Nevi'im at least, has a flavor of tzedakah mishpat. What's interesting about it is, where do you see the term tzedakah mishpat first show up? Where? Tzedakah mishpat, in Bereshit. And Chaseh, look at the last, go to page 2. You see Bereshit is the fourth source down. Bereshit Yud. This is the story where Hashem is about to destroy Sodom. Hashem is about to destroy Sodom, and he says, am I going to cover from Abraham? Am I going to hide from Abraham what I'm about to do? Abraham will be a great nation, and all the nations will bless him. Because it is known that he will command his household, his children and his household, to keep the path of God and to do righteousness and justice. In order that I should bring on Abraham everything that I say. Connection is striking. You know, Abraham, who makes the berit with Hashem, and the essence of our berit with HaKadosh Baruch Hu is tzedakah mishpat. Yerushalayim embodies that berit. Yerushalayim embodies these characteristics and these ideas. And no wonder it's such a tragedy that we lost it. But still, we have it today, so we still have to go and try to understand a little bit more what we're lacking today, even though we have Yerushalayim in our control. Just one of the, from Bereshit Rabbah, that also Chachamim are playing, the Midrash wants to also make this one correlation between Adoni Tzedek and Yerushalayim being as a place of Tzedek. We have in Yeshaya, Echa Heita Zona, Kirya Ne'emana, Me'etim Mishpat Tzedek Elimba, Be'ata Merasichim. How is she, this is Yeshaya prophesying, it's the same chapter, how has she become like a harlot? She was called honesty. She is filled with justice, and righteousness dwelled in her. So Chachamim say again, the place that makes the inhabitants righteous, Malki Tzedek, Adon Tzedek, Tzedek is justice called Jerusalem. This string in Tanakh of taking Yerushalayim and call it Tzedek is very central to our Torah. So how do we create such a city? Great that we have this city. We have this ideal city, this utopian city, which is going to be a place of justice and righteousness. From our ancestor Abraham Avinu. How do we create it? How is it going to be maintained? Come the teachers of this justice, of Devar Hashem. So on the bottom of page 2, Devarim. So, chapter Perek Yuzan. Yipaleh mimecha davar lemishpat ben dam ledam ben din ledin. Saying when an issue comes up, arises, whether it's a capital case, whether it's a monetary case, you're going to go up to the place that God has chosen. We're going to go to the Kohanim and the Leviim and the judges that are there on those days, and they will discern and they will tell you what the law is, what the judgment is. It's interesting that Chachamim in Gemara Sanhedrin Daf Nud Bet Amud Bet says the following: Ubata el haKohanim haLeviim ve'el haShofet asher yeh b'mimahem zman sheyesh kohen yesh mishpat zman she'en kohen en mishpat. The time that there is a kohen serving in the Beit HaMikdash, there is mishpat, there's to be judgment, justice. And when there's not a Kohen, there won't be justice. So we all know that the Kohanim, historically in the Second Temple period, many of them abused their power, and even, I should say, in the First Temple period, in the biblical period, and throughout the Nevi'im, there are Kohanim that abuse their power in the Mishkan. But I think what the Gemara is saying is, in the ideal sense, we need Kohanim, we need leaders, we need judges who are going to carry out Mishpat. I think that's the essence of what makes the character of Yerushalayim. It's not the city, it's not the bricks. It's a beautiful city. But it's not the architecture, it's not the bricks. It's the people, it's the leadership.
And deserve the punishment?
Let's get to that at the end. And even so, if you go on to the last source on the bottom of page 2, let the priest clothe with righteousness and the saints shout with joy. And the Radak writes on this, the priestly garments, which are garments of justice, they reflect justice. They should have, they're the symbol of justice. But the Ibn Ezra goes even further. And he says the reason that it says concerning the Kohanim, garments of justice, is because they are the teachers of the Torah and the judges of Israel. So that's Yerushalayim. Now, where does the Beit HaMikdash fit into all this? Beit HaMikdash was the center it was the heart of the nation. It was the center place. It was the capital. It was the place where judgment was executed. The highest courts. So far, like in Washington D.C., Kaviyachol, we have the Supreme Court that's right next to the Capitol. Right? The Supreme Court of the United States. So too in our capital, but not even only in our capital, within the temple, our court stood. And you're going to see in a couple of minutes how this was all set up. On page 3. So Chachamim are making these connections for us as well. So in the Parashat Yitro, the last pasuk and the first pasuk of Mishpatim, the last pasuk in Yitro says, "V'lo ta'aled ma'alot al mizbechi, asher lo yitigale ervata alav." So you shouldn't go up. You shouldn't have stairs up to the mizbeach. There should be a ramp, so nobody's uncovered when he's in the avodah of Hashem. Right? His erva is not uncovered. The next pasuk is Ve'ela hamishpatim asher tasim lefnehem. So Chachamim, this is from the Mechilta of Masechet Devichadesh Yitro. From this we conclude that Sanhedrin convene at the side of the altar. Okay? Let's see. And there's another Hekesh, there's another joining of this, juxtaposition. Where in Devarim Perek Tet Zayin, chapter 16, we talk the few passages in that section that talk about Shofatim and Shotirim and Tzedek and Lo Tikach Shochad, don't take bribery, because the Shochad Ya'aver Einei Chachamim Yisalef Divei Tzadikim. It blinds bribery blinds the eyes of the Chachamim, and it leads astray the words of the Tzadikim. Tzedek Tzedek Tirduf, you should seek out righteousness only. Okay? In order that you should inherit the land that God has given you, and then lo tita lecha asherah kolis. Do not plant an asherah, a tree. Asherah is a tree that was used for avodah zarah. Do not plant it next to the mizbeach that God has given you. So the Rish Lakish in the Gemara, Sanhedrin 7b, anyone who appoints a judge for the public who is not upright, it is as if he planted an asherah in Israel. The comparison is a judge who is immoral is like avodah zarah. But again, the comparison is that the judgment was near the mizbeach. And now you're going to see as to how that is the case. There's the Mishnah as well in this, but I brought down the Gemara of the Beraita, because it elaborates a little bit about how the court system was set up in Eretz Israel. Okay? So, Tanya Amar Rabbi Yosef Metchila lo hayu merabim machloket b'Yisrael ela beitim shel 71 yoshvim b'lishchat hagazit. So, Rabbi Yosef says at a certain point in time there was never a machloket in Israel amongst Chachamim. There was never a halachic disagreement. How is that possible? We have hundreds and hundreds of pages, right, of literature that every Chacham is arguing one another. And even today, we don't have such a thing. Now, we have many Chachamim disagree, but what he means is there was not a machloket because there was one deciding law because of the court. Okay? So it seems odd to us because, you have two Jews, you got three opinions, and we all have many different opinions and people have a hard time coming to terms with certain things, but the unification of Am Yisrael was under the court system. So so they would sit at the Lishchat HaGazit. Lishchat HaGazit was in the Beit HaMikdash. It literally means the room of hewn stone. They couldn't, that's how they would cut the stones in this type of room, they said. But also it was a room in the northern wall of Beit HaMikdash. When we were in Israel a few months ago, there was a room that we went under the tunnels of the Kotel, and they actually think that was the room the Sanhedrin convened. And they said there was a war there because they saw lots of trajectories and some damage to the stone. But it was an amazing thing to see that, this is Lishchat HaGazit, this is the place Hachamim would decide the law. In any event, so that's where the high court would be of Sanhedrin 71. There would be 23, two courts of 23 Hachamim, and one would sit at the entrance of the Temple Mount, and one would sit on the entrance to the courtyard of the Beit HaMikdash. And then there were other courts of 23 that sat in every city in Eretz Yisrael. Pretty unified system. It wasn't so. It was pretty laid out. Nice system of justice. And the Gemara goes on and explains how it would happen. You lived in your certain city, and your city you had an issue. You had a disagreement with financial disagreement with somebody. So you went to the court at that time. If the court in your city could not decide the case, usually they'll decide the case. If it was a matter that needed to go up to a higher court, so then it would go to the court in the entrance of Rabbi. If that court could understand, not only that, Harambam writes is that if the court in your city didn't know it, is that the judges and the plaintiffs and the defendants, they would all go to Jerusalem. And then that court, the next court, at the entrance of Rabbi, if they didn't know, they would go to them and the judges, and all those judges would go there to hear the law, and so on until it needed to reach to the high court of the Sanhedrin. It's no accident, though, that our courts, Supreme Courts of Am Yisrael, are in Rabbi, are in the Beit HaMikdash. Feeding, not only is it a theme in the Tanakh of Mitzvah Mishpat, that's Yerushalayim, but it's a theme also in rabbinics, in our culture, in our tradition. Remember we mentioned about Abraham and Tzedakah Mishpat? That was the introduction to the Sodom story, where God destroys Sodom. And Abraham pleads. And he pleads to God, and he says, what if there's 50, what if there's 40? And goes down all the way to 10. Many Pesukim use Jerusalem, they juxtapose, and they basically say that Jerusalem is the antithesis of Sodom. And you'll see that in a minute, as some of these Pesukim. But what's more amazing is that, I forget which chapter of Yirmiyah, is that Yirmiyah also prays for Jerusalem. And he prays for it to be saved by God. And he goes through a similar counting. But he doesn't stop at 10. He stops at 1. And we couldn't save. Just on the bottom of page 3, this is Yeshaya, the first chapter. There's a lot in that first chapter of Yeshaya. It's really worthwhile to read, to analyze. Lulei Hashem Tzivot Hitil Lanu Sarid Kimat Kisidom Hayinu La'amora Daminu. Devar Hashem Kitzenu Sodom Ha'azinu Torat Elokeinu Am Amora. Were the Lord not to leave us any tiny remnant, we would be like Sodom, we would be comparable to Amorah. Hear the word of Hashem, rulers of Sodom, hear the teaching of our God, your people Amorah. Cheskel makes the comparison as well, but we also saw in Eicha last night, on page 4, Eicha chapter 4, Vayigdal avon bat ami mechata'at Sodom, ha'afucha k'moraga v'lo halu b'yadayim. For the iniquity of the daughter of my people is greater than the sin of Sodom, that was overthrown as in a moment, and no hand fell upon her. So, when we're not this city of justice, we became the city of Sodom. But how did that happen? Everybody can guess how did that happen. Whose fault was it? How we lost the justice? Corruption. Where? This Kohanim. Was it only the Kohanim? Leaders. Okay, let's go through it a little bit. And we're going to read these in English because they're a little bit longer, and we're going to go a little faster about this. So I want to get to the second part of the class and do a little bit of the midrash on the destruction as well. Here I pray, on G, on the page 4, the English. Here I pray to the heads of Yaakov and officers of the house of Israel who abhor justice and pervert all fairness, who build Zion with blood and Jerusalem with injustice. The heads of the city judge with bribes, its Kohanim teach for hire, and its prophets divine for money. It's a sad state. Also Yeshaya, the same type of critique. Also Perek Aleph again. How the faithful city has become like a harlot. It was full of judgment, justice lodged in it, but now murderers, your silver has become dross. When it says zonah, the word harlot, it's a very, right, Rabbi was talking about it last week, but it's a very good analogy insofar as there is an exclusive relationship. I gave a class a couple weeks ago, there's an exclusive relationship between Hashem and Am Yisrael. And when Am Yisrael has not only people are following other gods, but it becomes part of the establishment, the leadership establishment, that they are doing something wrong, immoral. Not just wrong, they're violating a mitzvah, but something integrally immoral and violating the mitzvot. Then Hashem becomes El Kana. He becomes a jealous God. And not jealousy in the way that we should normally understand it in our culture. Jealous means that he has a right to try to preserve that relationship, that exclusive relationship. There's an exclusive relationship between a man and a woman. One should be jealous for the other. We have a right to preserve that exclusive relationship. When we violate, that's what El Kana, that was Pinehas's Kin'ah, that's what a man's Kin'ah for his wife, and vice versa is. That type of jealousy is what it is. It's actually something that's advocated by the Torah and the Chachamim, that you should have some sort of jealousy for your exclusive relationship. Am Yisrael and Borei Olam have an exclusive relationship. And it's something that has to be preserved. And that's the B'rit. And Hashem is going to go, Elliot, that was your question. Should it have happened, we violated it. That was our B'rit. He becomes El Kana, he becomes a jealous God, not only when we go to other gods, but we pervert his law. And it's interesting, because what were the greatest in Chumash, in Torah Moshe, what were the greatest Hata'im? Was it the man? Was it the Silav when they complained about water? The Egel and the Miragelim, right? So the Miragelim, and that's what Chachamim say, Tish'a BeAb, it also happened on Tish'a BeAb. It was the leadership that swayed the people, and the people didn't stand up. There were leaders that they could have followed, but the people decided not to. It became an establishment through the leadership. Chayta Egel. What leader was involved in Chayta Egel? Aaron HaKohen. The leadership sanctioned it. And that becomes a problem. So if we have a few strays of people that are doing something wrong, okay, we could tolerate it. We should try to change it. We should try to convince it. We should have the leadership to get involved. But when the leadership starts to do it, it starts to become part of the problem. That's when things go a little wary. This is the bottom of page 4. Is a wonderful pasuk, and it's a wonderful section of Yirmiyah, chapter 5, and I just want to read it in English because I just want to get to the next part of the class. Actually, I have to read it in Hebrew. It's so beautiful. Shotetu b'chosot Yerushalayim urna ud'u b'bachshu b'chovotei im titzu ish im yesh oseh mishpat mevakesh emunah v'eslach la. The English is on the top of the next page. Let's try to go see in Yerushalayim, see if you can find in the streets a man who would do justice, and he's seeking truth. Shemu asitayim gam avru divrei ra din lo danu din yatom yasliach mishpat evanim lo shafatu. They are waxing with fat, they have become sleek, they overpass in deeds of wickedness, they plead not the cause of the fatherless, of the orphans, and that they make it not to prosper, and the justice to the needy they do not judge. Hanivi'im nibi'u b'shakir, the prophets prophesied in falsehood. V'kohanim yidu al yidehem, and the priests bear the rule at their beck. They did whatever they wanted. Ve'ami ahavuchem, and my nation, they loved it. Can't just blame the people, Jack. Can't just blame the leaders. It's not just bad. It's our responsibility as well. It's the leaders that sanction it, and it becomes ingrained when they join forces, but it's also the people's fault. What then should we do in the end? There's an interesting halakha brought down by Rambam. I was trying to find, I don't know where it was, I think it's in Talmud Torah, I'm not sure. The halakha is as follows. Rambam writes is that every kahal, every community, should choose a hacham, a rabbi, a leader, who is going to tell them when they do something wrong, in order to keep them on the derech Hashem, on the right path. It's the sivui, it's a commandment, it's mitzvah on the community to choose this type of leader. We don't just want the rabbi to give us a good speech, to be our pals. We want a leader to keep us, keeping the mitzvot, to instruct us, to teach us. He should be a loving leader, goes without saying, but also he has to have the strength to do that. And the last two sources in Echa also go into criticizing the Nevi'im, their prophets, or the ones that proclaim to be prophets. Remember, a Navi is somebody who brings the word of Hashem. If they were false prophets, they claimed to be a prophet, but they weren't really doing that. But the last source on page 5, Echad Daled Yud Gimel, Mechatot Nevi'eha Avonot Kohanea Shofachim B'Kilba Dam Sadikim. It has become the sins of their prophets and the iniquities of her priests that have shed the blood of the just in the midst of others. And it's sad. Yerushalayim is such an integral part of Torah. It's an integral part because of what it represents, these ideals. And some may say, hey, it's only an ideal. It's only a utopia. But it existed at certain times, and we had it. And it can exist again. And that's what we're mourning. That mourning that great loss. And I think Tish'a BeAb, in one sense it is sad. Our people were slaughtered. Our cities were destroyed. Our temple was destroyed. Our ethos was stripped from us, torn out of our hearts. But on the other hand, and that's why we mourn as well, but on the other hand, it's very interesting. So we didn't have the mourning. I asked you, would we appreciate Yerushalayim? Would we appreciate the Beit HaMikdash? And I don't think so. If we didn't mourn, if we didn't have Tish'a BeAb, if we didn't do say at our weddings, we couldn't appreciate what this city is, what the purpose of the city, what the purpose of Torah is. The world needs this ideal. Not only the Jews. And that's why Zechariah prophesizes that in the end of days, after this war of Gog and Magog, and how this final battle and our leader comes up, all the nations of the world will come and worship in Yerushalayim. It's not just for us. We need something to strive for. We want to keep Tariag Mitzvot, yes. We want to keep all the Mitzvot, and we want to be good to everybody, but unless we have that symbol, that bastion, that temple, that infuses justice with righteousness, then we're not shooting high enough. Shalim is an ideal, but it's a necessary idea to fulfill the Torah. What I want to do is go to the next handout. I didn't make so many, I wasn't sure how many people were coming, but it's in English, so I'm going to read some of it out loud. And it's the famous... Yeah.
Because we do more every day, we appreciate, that's the only way to get it back, right? That's Napoleon's point.
That's Napoleon's point, right?
That's exactly the point. Because we're still mourning it and we're appreciating it, it will be rebuilt. Otherwise, we forgot we would never have it.
100%.
That's exactly it.
That's why it's a beautiful mashal. Thank you for bringing it up to me. Any other questions up to this point? Okay. So now we're going to do a fun... the Midrash, it's always fun to go into the words of Chachamim, but it's... I don't mean fun, I just mean to understand what Chazal interpreted, how they interpreted the events that led up to it, right? So we have this Midrash of Kamsa and Bar Kamsa. We all... What?
Sorry, we had Tish'a BeAb.
It's a machloket whether they had Tish'a BeAb during Beit Sheni. Right.
They stop those beds.
What's interesting is that on the last page, which I thought was very interesting also on this while we're here, is that Harambam writes like this. It says, all the fasts, he talks about Hilchot Ta'aniyot, all the fasts will be nullified in the days of Mashiach. ולא עוד, אלא שהם עתידים להיות ימים טובים וימי ששון ושמחה, שנאמר כה שמע השם צבאות, צום רביעי, צום חמישי, צום שביעי, צום העשירי יהיה לבית יהודה לששון ושמחה מועדים טובים. That's why I wrote your quoting, David. But all these holidays, all these fast days are going to become Yom Simcha. How do they become Yom Simcha? Shouldn't they say Yom, the day of mourning? There was a destruction, there were people killed, there was a building destroyed. Why Chachamim saying it becomes a Simcha?
Once the Beit HaMikdash is built, they want to give it that much more.
Okay.
We recognize the fulfillment of the prophecy.
Fulfillment of the prophecy. Exactly. But also, is that we got it back. We won it.
That's what we're making fun of me.
Excuse me? Good.
Our yearning was fulfilled. Receive a reward.
Receive a reward. We got our city of Tzedek and Mishpat back. I think that itself, it's the Sodom Yerushalayim comparison. It's the Evel Yom Tov. We have these. Yes, it's the reward, but it's the flip side of the loss. We appreciated the loss insofar as that we saw the significance of it, and once we regained it, now we're.
The problem is always when people say that it's had an interpretation of what does it mean to get it back. It's always subject to interpretation. For a young person to look at Yerushalayim now and say, wow, we're asking for walls, there's a mall right there, fantastic. Beautiful mall, beautiful people. There's more people now in Yerushalayim than there ever was before. They're going to have more control over it than ever was before. So it's always going to be subject to some kind of relative, definition of what is getting it back.
Okay.
I could rebuild it.
I mean, we don't have to speak. We don't have to.
Because that's the language that the kids are going to speak.
It's a beautiful. Listen, Eretz Yisrael is beautiful. It is vibrant. There's so much wonderful things going on, but we still have work to do.
So when we're fasting Tish'a BeAb, we're not fasting the actual the destruction of that building. It's more the reason behind the destruction. So that's why I guess Chachamim would say that when that reason disappears, that's when we would stop fasting and mourning.
Exactly. Very good. Thank you for clarification. All right, so I'm sorry I didn't make enough of these copies. We were on short, but I want to go into the part of this midrash of Kamsa and Bar Kamsa, and it's a very interesting midrash. We all know the story, but we're going to run through it quickly because there's parts of the story I want to highlight, and that's in terms of how the leadership functions. Okay, and I think it's a very important part. A lot of times we talk about this. When you look at the story, we talk about Sinat Chinam, talk about the baseless hatred that occurred between the two. But there's another element to the story that I think often gets overlooked, which I wanted to bring out. Okay? So I have a full copy of the sheet, but it's the first page, I put a little arrow there. It says, Amar Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan says, what is the meaning of the verse? Happy is the man who fears always, but who hardens his heart and falls into the chief. Jerusalem was destroyed on account of Bar Kamsa. Right? So that's his answer to Rabbi Yochanan's question. Good. So we're going to go into the story of Kamsa Bar Kamsa, but I'm going to just paraphrase it quickly and skip on to the later part of the story. So the story goes as follows. There was this man wealthy man who wanted to have a party, right? He had a big Saada. He was inviting a lot of important people and dignitaries. He tells his servant, go invite my friend Kamsa and bring him here to my party. So the servant makes a mistake, and instead he invites his arch enemy. Interesting how there's two parallels here, the yin and the yang, the Yerushalayim and the Sodom. He invites his arch enemy, Bar Kamsa. So he comes, the party comes, Bar Kamsa's, I guess the king's inviting, he wants to make up maybe, I don't know what he's thinking. So he comes and he sits with all the dignitaries, and the wealthy man, the party host, he sees him there and he asks him to leave. He's very upset. So he says, please don't embarrass me. Bar Kamsa says, I will pay for my meal. He says, no, I want you out. But please don't embarrass me. I'll pay for everybody's meal here. He wants it out. He wants him out. He gets him out. Bar Kamsa gets very upset. And that's where we're going to pick up. On the bottom it says, Amar Ho'il. You see it on the side of the Hebrew? This is actually the Koran Talmud. It's actually it's a great English translation. It has a lot of interesting footnotes and insights into this. So after Bar Kamsa gets thrown out, so he says, since the sages were sitting and did not protest the actions of the host, it seems that they were content with what they did. That they were okay with what the host did to me, that he threw me out and embarrassed me. So I will therefore go inform the Echil Kurtzah, this is the emperor, to the king. Oh, sorry. I will inform against the king what happened. And he went and he said to the emperor, the Jews have rebelled against you. And the emperor said to them, who says this is the case? He says, go and test them and bring them an offering in honor of the government and see whether they will sacrifice the offering. So Bar Kamsa is upset. He's taking out his retribution, his embarrassment on the Chachamim. Okay? It's very interesting. So there's a whole discussion. Some Farshim want to say that, and there's a midrash to allude to this, but usually were the Chachamim right in not saying anything at that point. Alright, so a lot of great opinions on this thing, and there is a halakha that says if you see two people fighting, you have to say something, because halakha hocheach tochiach et amitecha, right? Hocheach tochiach. It doesn't necessarily mean rebuke; it means to confront. It's funny, you say rebuke, it sounds really harsh, right? So I learned from Norman Didier, actually made a very nice diuk on hocheach tochiach means to confront somebody on something. So you don't harbor, as the next pasuk, You don't want to harbor any hate. You don't want to take loti kam loti tor, because that's the next step in it. So if you have an issue with somebody, go and confront them. Tell them, you hurt me. You hurt my feelings. I would love to make peace with you, but this is what happened to me. I'm sorry if I... It's not the harsh rebuke. Again, devar shalom. So he's going to take this out in the Hachamim. And I don't think necessarily there's a smoking gun to say Hachamim at the party did anything. There's a very interesting midrash in a second then. So let's just go through the story. The emperor went down and sent him a 3-year-old calf. And while Bar Kamsa was coming to the temple, he cut the upper lip of the calf and he made it a mum, a blemish. We never offer a korban in the Beit HaMikdash when the animal has a blemish like that. Okay? But the goyim would do that. Okay. So now, you everybody know where we're on? It says Sibur Rabbanan on the left of the Hebrew. So the sages brought thoughts to the sacrifice of the animal due to the imperative to maintain peace with the government. Right? So the Chachamim said, we should offer this animal because if not, it's going to be a big insult to the government. Even though we didn't usually offer an animal with a blemish like this, we have to offer it up because, we can have a big problem with the Romans here, with the king. So Rabbi Zechariah ben Avkolo said to them, if we do that, then people may think it's permitted to offer an animal with the blemish on the altar. So he had another idea. They said, okay, then let's kill this guy so he doesn't go tell the king that we didn't offer his sacrifice. This Bar Kamsa guy, because he seems to be the emissary to the king offering the sacrifice, right? So then he said, Rabbi Zechariah ben Avkolos again said, now we can't offer the sacrifice, we can't kill him, right? It's actually a cruel thing. There's got to be a better way than killing somebody, but we can't kill him because then people say if you offered a blemished animal onto the Mizbeach, then you should be killed for it. Okay? So this is the astounding words. And Rabbi Yochanan said, the humility of Rabbi Zechariah ben Avkolos destroyed our temple, burned our sanctuary, and exiled us from our land. It's a tremendous statement. It's powerful. What do you mean? What happened to this guy Bar Kamsa? He's the one that got us in trouble. He's the one that got this emperor, us in his crosshairs. He wanted to see what was going on. He told them we were rebelling against him. Why is it Rabbi Zechariah ben Avkolos? Any opinions?
He could have said, sacrifice it anyway. And just, instead of saying what's the law between me and, what's the real law, and what about saving Jerusalem, saving people's lives?
Right. He's making diyuks. He's making, if we do this, and then this will happen. This will happen. Yeah. Sure. Right. He's indecisive.
More than that, I think it's showing that not just the decisiveness, it's the direction that they took as leaders, that they could bring the people in the right direction.
Yeah. Okay. Good.
Why were they all, you said that Chachamim, why were they all listening to one Rabbi? It was only Rabbi Zechariah's opinion, and they all agreed with him, and he said it. But if they all already had that opinion, shouldn't they want to agree with it? It seems like the majority, like a row.
It's a good question. Maybe he was the lead rabbi at the time on it. I'm not sure. It's a very good question.
Question of the leadership.
And maybe it didn't even happen this way, and maybe it did. But the fact, it's more important what the story is pointing to. And like Jack said, the story is pointing to the lack of leadership, the lack of decisiveness. Telling me is that we can't offer the mum. First off, the fact that we get the only second result was to kill the man seems to be a little extreme. Okay? But okay, he's an odid. So I understand that's the halakha would permit for it. But okay. The easier one is to offer the animal. Why are we so afraid of this? One time we could offer the animal just to keep the peace. But it seems very extreme. And so Rabbi Yochanan is criticizing. Initially he started to say Bar Kamsa was the reason that the Churban Bayit occurred. But in the end, he says also it's Rabbi Zechariah. So again, it's the people, it's the individuals of the society. And now here, we're not saying Rabbi Zechariah was bad. What we're saying is Rabbi Zechariah failed to act. He was afraid. He was afraid to act.
That sounds probably did wrong. When he saw as the issue was not that the party, but that all the Chachamim that were there didn't speak up and say, you can't embarrass us.
But isn't it also about truly understanding what does God really want? Does God really want? Does God really care that you're going to sacrifice something to blemish? Knowing the outcome, would be, okay, you broke the law, but the outcome of not doing it is destruction and mayhem.
That's only in hindsight.
Okay, but still,
But Hachamim often would make Eliyahu offered korbanot and bamot because it lasot Hashem. We could debate that.
They knew the king was going to
I think the point of the story was, though, you're right, and we can discuss it more, but the point of the story is that he was indecisive. He saw two choices and he didn't know what to do, and it was clear what the right thing was to do. But now the Midrash Rabbi Echa actually adds something to the Bar Kamsa story. I just want to get 5 minutes on the wrap it up. Hold on to it, we have time in a minute. He adds a point in the Bar Kamsa. Look at the bottom of page 5, right? During the whole Bar Kamsa story, where he's thrown out, the Midrash writes like this. Rav Zechariah, bottom of page 5, it's in bold. Rav Zechariah ben Avkolus, who was present, could have prevented the host from treating the man in this manner, but did not intervene. So, that last line, if you look, Rabbi Yosef said, the modesty of Zechariah ben Avkolus burned the temple. This is different. This is not the story in the Gemara Gittin. This is the story in the Midrash of it, Midrash Rabbi Echa. And he's saying that it's the same thing. The lack of action of the Hachamim not having the peace. When he says the humility, the anavut, it was the humility of he didn't think he had the right to say anything. He was a little timid to say something at the party. He was a little timid to make such a bold move to matir, to permit the korban. And just I think it's clear, but I wanted the last part. There's many agadot in here. If you want to take these home, please do, and you can see them. But now, to compare Rabbi Zechariah to Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, as you all know, escaped Yerushalayim. There were people that burnt all the storehouses that could have lasted 20 years, whatever they said. And he had to escape because these people, the body and beard Yonim, they wanted to have war. They didn't want us to outlive to live in the walls during the siege. So Rabbi Yochanan escapes. They didn't want him to escape, but he had to sneak out in a coffin, etc. So now he meets the emperor Vespasian. He was a general at the time. He predicted Vespasian would become the emperor, and now Vespasian wants to reward him, and he says, "Give any request, and you ask Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, and I will fulfill it." Already, though, we already mentioned at this point, his armies are marching on Yerushalayim. Okay, so Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai says as follows. So he says, "Give me Yavneh and its sages, and do not destroy it, and spare the dynasty of Ramban Gamliel, and do not kill them as if they were rebels. And lastly, give me the doctors to heal Rabbi Sadok." Right? It's an odd request, and his colleagues are a little upset with his request. But he said, let's save the Hachamim in Yavneh, Rabbi Sadok, and Ramban Gamliel's family. So Rabbi Yosef reads about him, and some say Rabbi Akiva says, the reply to the verse to Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, who turns wise men backward and makes their knowledge foolish, as he should have said to him, leave the Jews alone this time. Okay? And why did Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai make this request? He maintained that Vespasian might not do that much for him, and there would not even be a small amount of salvation. Rabbi Yochanan, unlike Rabbi Zechariah, was forced with he had a decision to make. And he thought it's probably most likely done. And I'm going to hedge my bet. I'm not going to ask him something that he probably won't do, because his armies are already marching. I'm going to ask him to save the lifeblood, the heartbeat of Am Yisrael, and that's the Torah. tzedek and mishpat is infused in the Torah. It's in the Torah, it's in the Berit. We took it, he wanted to take it out of Yerushalayim and preserve it. That's leadership. That's why he's praised amongst all. His colleagues were upset at the time. Rabbi Akiva was very upset. Called him even foolish. Yeah, he was, exactly. But Rabbi Yochanan Zakkai said it was imperative that we say the essential aspects of Torah, the culture of the Torah, the culture of Tzedakah. And again, but just to reiterate, I just want to sum up, Yerushalayim, we're mourning the destruction of Tzedek and Mishpat, the city of righteousness and justice, infused with the courts, infused with the mitzvot. What makes the city and what breaks the city is our actions and the actions of our leaders. Or the lack of action of our leaders. And I think one of the lessons from here is that, and we learned that Rambam, I wish I had the source so everybody would see it, but I think it's an integral lesson. And that source, that we have to appoint leaders that are tzedek, that will fulfill tzedek and mishpat. But it's not enough to appoint these leaders, it's to support them, and to be with them, and to follow them. And when there is an injustice, we also have to speak out and encourage our leaders to speak out and to stop that. Because that, in the end, is really the commemoration of Tish'a BeAb, commemoration of the destruction of the Churban.